Hello. You all, I'm hoping, are starting to brainstorm this first paper, which we're calling a rhetorical analysis paper. In it, what you are doing is not making an argument for the environment at all. What you are doing is you are using tools of rhetorical analysis to understand how effective another person's argument about the environment has been. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to give you some hints, tips, and strategies for pulling together the paper and laying it out into a format that would be recognizable to readers. I'll be guiding you through some of the moves that you want to make in a paper like this by giving you a true-to-life example of a paper that was turned into me 2 years ago. And then what I'll do is I'll give you some strategies specifically in terms of environmental communication. So let me share my screen really quickly. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got a paper that was turned in 2018 to me in another class in English 335. Now it's a core class in the English major, but don't let this scare you. Some of you actually are English majors. The rest of you, we're doing a similar enough paper where I think this is still going to be useful for you all as an organizing strategy for the paper that we're doing. Okay, so remember, this is the kind of thing that you do once you've decided on a topic and once you've done some brainstorming about the approach that you can take, the points you want to make. Maybe you've made some notes or even an outline. That's totally fine. But remember, the goal of this is to show you how to lay those ideas out in writing. So here we go. So you'll see, now this is not a paper that's related to the environment like our papers are. You'll see that this student immediately starts off by saying, Jill Lepore, a professor of history at Harvard University, wrote a critic at large piece for the New Yorker. This intro paragraph overall locates people in what we're talking about. That is, gives me the bigger context for the issue that they're going to talk about in the rest of the paper. For us, that could be the bigger context of some environmental issue like plastics or recycling or climate change or infrastructure or any of the things that we've kind of hinted at so far in the course. But it could also be something else. The history of a particular writer and their approach to writing about the environment, the history of the rhetorical situation that's at play, some kind of debate over what we should do on some kind of environmental issue. But you also notice, and this is something that could be useful for you as well, I don't really need a works cited page for this paper. I just need a link to the paper, to the thing that you're analyzing itself in some form. So dump that into a link in your paper, and I think we'll call it good. Overall, then, what this first paragraph does is it leads up to a kind of a generalized statement about what the paper is going to do. By the end of the first paragraph, this person says, Lepore also uses the court cases more emotional-based rhetoric to further persuade the reader's opinion in the direction of the undocumented immigrant students and access to educational rights. Okay, great. I see the word emotional, and I think pathos. It turns out it is a paper about pathos. But it's also framed around, well, how are readers going to react to this? And that's also another strategy I'd suggest to you in terms of laying out your own papers. Use language about readers in order to figure out how readers might respond and how effective a particular text has been to readers. We can talk about that too some more a little bit later on, because all readers are not the same. That is, the people who read The New Yorker are not the same people who read Sports Illustrated. I'm not being cynical here. It's the truth. Okay, so going on really quickly, the second paragraph, which you see right here, summarizes the issue that the text is discussing in specific. That is, what is the whole of the text really concerned with? This is a good summary paragraph. Maybe I don't have time to read the source article that you're going to be rhetorically analyzing in your paper. I only have time to read your paper. So I want to know quickly, well, what is this argument really about? What are the issues that this author explores? What are the points that that author brings up? And maybe, even maybe, you give me a couple of quotes from this author so that I can see kind of like what the flavor of their writing style is. But what you'll also see by the end of this second paragraph is that the author is getting a little more specific about the pathos that we're actually going to find in this article. So that's good. I see the author using a number of different kinds of locational or signpost sentences to tell me not only here's what I'm going to do in this paper, but here's why it's important. So what we then see is the middle of the paper that gives me all kinds of ways in which pathos functions in this text. Lepore does this thing in order to use pathos. Lepore does this thing in order to use pathos. So what I'm getting at is that in a paper like this, the middle of your paper is where you really say, they use this rhetorical technique in any number of ways, and I'm going to show them to you now. I'm going to give you actual examples of the text, and I'm going to analyze them in terms of what they mean, how effective they are, what the appeal or strategy is of this, and how it connects to their argument overall. But what we also see is the writer here is kind of going through the article and pulling out what he or she they think is most important in terms of pathos. Like I say here, the author's paragraphs are oriented around ways in which I see pathos or appeals to pathos in this text. Now, here's the final paragraph, and here's what I really have as a kind of an exhortation to you all in English 338. What do we have here? We kind of have a fluffy final paragraph where the author says, throughout the article, Lepore writes in such a structure, utilizing both sides of the argument that appears to be neutral. But as the reader dives down deeper, we see how Lepore inserts her opinion by using appeals to emotion, parallelism, and so on. So this is kind of a repeat of what we've already learned in the essay. It doesn't really break any new ground. For your papers in English 338, what I'd suggest is a slightly different tack. Like I say here, try to answer the questions, okay, so what have we learned here? Either about rhetoric or about how the environmental issue the author is discussing needs help from rhetoric in order to be effectively handled in the 21st century. Why is this important? Why is us looking at this particular text or this author's work significant to us right now at this particular point in time? And finally, this is the real important one. What does my analysis show readers about environmental rhetoric, either specifically with this one case, maybe it's about plastic or recycling or, lithium batteries or something like that, or in general? What if we want to see, I'll come back. If we want to see action on climate change, is this the kind of rhetoric that would do it? Or is it the opposite of that? Here is where I get to, I think, an important point that we can keep in mind as we're starting to gather our thoughts for this paper. Let us remember a couple of things. First things first, you don't have to choose a piece of rhetoric that you like in order to analyze it. Nor do you have to find something you dislike in order to analyze it. Your goal isn't to like it or dislike it. Secondly, you don't have to agree with the author in order to analyze it, nor do you necessarily need to disagree. But those choices can be fun because you can find something that really pisses you off and analyze rhetorically why it pisses you off. You can find an argument, let's just say an argument for doing nothing about climate change, and analyze why it's ineffective, or analyze why it's very effective and we have to watch out for this kind of rhetoric because we definitely have to do something about climate change. In short, your goal is not to like or to dislike or to agree or disagree. Those can be things, though, that you use in order to figure out what you want to analyze. When it comes to this paper, what I want to see is a well-organized kind of structured, focused analysis of the particular words, phrases, sentences, let's just call them rhetorical moves that an author or speaker uses in order to try to convince us to do something about an environmental issue. When you are showing us how that author does those things, and when you are using a particular rhetorical term, like pathos or stereotyping, typecasting, or definitions, or audience, or other kinds of things like that, then you are doing a good job. Let's also remember, in terms of this, what we've got is we've got a process where you have a rough draft, let's call it a first draft, but a completed draft by next Wednesday. What is complete? What does completed but not done mean? You got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's clearly not done. You've got some things you still got to attend to. Maybe you have bullet points in the middle, but it's a full draft, even though it still needs revising. You've got a full draft by next Wednesday. I set up a structure where you share your drafts with other people in our class. You get 2 peer critiques and you give 2 peer critiques. Then you turn in a revised draft to me. I will read it and I'll give you more commentary that you can use in order to revise it. I'm a big believer in revision. You can revise as many times as you want until you are totally satisfied or just completely sick of the paper. And we will establish together a kind of a drop-dead deadline for revising the paper. But I'm really happy to work with revisions, and I am really eager to see what you do with this draft. What I'm thinking at this point is a drop-dead deadline for this paper will be sometime later in the semester. I just don't want it to interfere with the next project that we're going to do. So we'll talk about that together as a class. But so this was my longish video trying to explain to you ways to get started with this video. Hit me up by email if you have any other questions. Thanks.